passengers on board that SAA plane that was held up on the tarmac at an airport in Warsaw in Poland have finally been allowed to disembark. They include journalists we spoke to our own and security personnel protecting, or who were meant to be protecting, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is part of an African peace mission visiting Russia and Ukraine. They were barred from leaving the plane after arriving yesterday before midday. They were allowed to leave about middle of this afternoon while tense negotiations with the Polish authorities were underway. So that was more than 24 hours. Let's speak to Thembisa Fakude, Senior Research Fellow and Director of the think tank Africa-Asia Dialogues, or Afrasid. Thank you for being with us as always, Thembisa. You've said before that our stated neutrality on Russia could affect our reputation in the eyes of some, several or many countries. Do you think this was about the paperwork at all? Or is this really the Poles being suspicious of South Africa?
I think it's two things. One is, as Begekele said, there was something wrong with our paperwork. We took copies of the original documents that were supposed to be submitted to the authorities in Poland, which created this fiasco and the challenge. But there's another problem, of course, that is the disorganizations of the Polish people. There's something really wrong there. Someone is not speaking to somebody else who's in charge of making such decisions. Here you have a president of a country visiting your country with the intention of transiting into another country, and the most important part of his entourage is held back due to some authorities questioning the originality of the documents. So I think it's both sides. The Polish are certainly not communicating, and there is an element of disorganization there. But at the same time, the South Africans were found wanting in terms of not being totally prepared, as Peggy clearly said, with the original documents.
But do you think it could be sort of vengeful, or trying to teach us a lesson in any sort of way, or do we really need more details to make that call?
Well, I'll give you my personal experience. I've covered wars on several fronts, and there is quite a lot of paperwork that's required for you to enter a country. I mean, it's not funny that you have organizations such as the BBC and CNN already covering when the war starts. It's because they are prepared. I think to an extent we were a bit comfortable, hoped for the best, that because we were hosted, at least the journalists and the security entourage, because they were hosted by the government, all was going to be in order. And I think there was a lot of realization, because basically we're importing equipment into another country, and that requires a lot of paperwork. And I've done this many times before. So I think the South African journalist and the military apparatus was caught or found wanting this time around, because they thought that all was taken care of.
What do you think of the presidency saying that the president's security has not been compromised in any way? So it may be embarrassing, but they're saying he's fine.
Of course it's compromised. You have your entire entourage, security entourage left behind, and you are in Ukraine at your own, by your own. The security is certainly compromised. Luckily, nothing has happened so far. But we are told that all the weapons that are supposed to be used to protect the president and the personnel that's supposed to protect the president was kept back in Poland, and the president went ahead on a train by himself and some of the senior officials within government. So definitely the security was compromised, and I think the president must come out and be honest and say exactly what has happened.
What do you think of the actual mission now? Could it lead to anything? Documents reported on suggesting that the African leaders first want some sort of trust to be fostered among the two nations at war.
Well, earlier on, Sowetan reported that 3 of the heads of state have pulled out. We don't know how true that is, but we know that some of the government or some of the heads of state that were supposed to be participating in this are now going to be represented by some senior representative from those governments. So, and what stole the show at the moment, at least the media show, because the whole thing is, at least for this first leg of negotiations, it was a media show. But the fiasco that took place in Poland stole the limelight, and now we're trying to catch up. But President Cyril Ramaphosa is almost on his second second half of this tour. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen henceforth in terms of what will come out from and what the journalists will be allowed to cover. So we'll have to wait and see in that regard. But I think there is an element of course, mistrust because of what South Africa has done in terms of flip-flopping and confusing positions. When we have the minister in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation calling Russia friends, and at the same time we've had military drills on the anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. That in itself has created confusion, and I think it's going to be this part of the leg of the negotiations will deal mainly with the re-establishment of trust before the negotiations can assume in earnest.
Finally, do you think our president will take the opportunity to speak to President Putin behind closed doors about this little problem of an ICC arrest warrant?
Well, I think those negotiations are or have been exhausted. I don't think there's anything else to be communicated to Vladimir Putin. We had the ministers of foreign affairs visiting South Africa. There's been telephone calls between China, Russia, and all others. So the discussion has been exhausted as far as I'm concerned. And I think the decision has been made, by the way, by both parties. We're just not told what's going to be happening. There's been talks of moving this meeting to China and other countries. But I think the decision is made, and I think the discussion has been exhausted. I don't think that will be part of this discussion or of this meeting, at least. So this meeting will mainly concentrate on the mission of the day, which is trying to resolve the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
All right, thank you very much. Thembisa Fakude, Senior Research Fellow and Director of Africa-Asia Dialogues.